was a test screening with that 500 people attended a couple of weeks ago. It's gotten a great response from people, which has been awesome.
On the morning of December 20th, 2009, Sharon Murphy called 911. Her voice on that recording is the sound of a mother who cannot believe what is happening. "My daughter's passed out," she says. "She was dizzy. She couldn't walk right. She's had a cold." Paramedics arrived at the house on Rising Glen Road in Hollywood Hills, the $3.9 million home that Brittany Murphy had purchased from Britney Spears in 2003. The house that had once represented everything she had worked toward, and that had become, in the final year of her life, a place she dreaded. She had told friends she wanted to leave. She wanted to get back to the East Coast, back to New York, back to somewhere that felt like a new start. She did not make it out. They found Brittany Murphy in the bathroom. They worked on her. They transported her to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. She was pronounced dead at 10:04 the morning on December 20th, 2009. She was 32 years old. It was 4 days before Christmas. The cause of death, determined by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office and announced in February 2010, was pneumonia. Severe iron deficiency anemia and multiple drug intoxication were listed as significant contributing factors. The drugs in her system were not illegal narcotics. They were the contents of a medicine cabinet: hydrocodone and acetaminophen from prescription pain medication, L-methamphetamine from a decongestant, chlorpheniramine from an antihistamine. The drugs of a sick person trying to manage symptoms. She had been ill for 6 weeks. She had called a doctor on Friday. The appointment was for Monday. She collapsed on Sunday. She was 32 years old. The death would have been heartbreaking on its own terms. A 32-year-old actress, one of the most distinctive talents of her generation, gone from a treatable illness that had progressed without medical intervention. The specific quality of the tragedy is its preventability. If someone in that house had taken her to a hospital sooner, if the illness had been treated when it started, rather than 6 weeks later, if the appointment had been for Friday instead of Monday, these are the questions that follow a death like this and that have no satisfying answers. And then, 5 months later, it happened again. On May 23, 2010, in the same house, in the same bedroom, Sharon Murphy found Brittany's husband, Simon Monjack, unconscious. She called 911 at 9:20 the evening. Paramedics arrived and were unable to revive him. Monjack was pronounced dead at 9:45 p.m. He was 40 years old. The coroner's findings: acute pneumonia and severe anemia. The same causes as his wife's death, in the same house, in the same bedroom where Brittany Murphy had been found, the same way 5 months before. 2 deaths, 1 house, same bedroom, same causes, 5 months apart. The Los Angeles coroner determined both deaths were accidental and due to natural causes. The questions that everyone who heard the story immediately asked, the obvious, immediate, unavoidable questions, have never been definitively answered. This is the complete story of Brittany Murphy. It is a story about a girl from New Jersey who wanted to be a star with such complete conviction that her mother sold everything they had to get her to Hollywood. About a career that was brilliant for a few years and then was systematically dismantled by a combination of industry cruelty, personal choices, and a man named Simon Monjack. About what it means to be a young woman in Hollywood in the early 2000s, subjected to the specific viciousness of a media culture that photographed your body, commented on your weight, and called you names until you disappeared. About the house on Rising Glen Road where 2 people died in the same bedroom from the same causes within 5 months, and nobody has ever been charged with anything. It is also a story about the specific way that talent can be extraordinary and still not be protected, not by the industry, not by the people around you, not even by your own awareness of what you have. Brittany Murphy had the talent. She had the instincts. She had the training and the drive and the career and the roles. And she was still, in the end, in a bathroom in Hollywood Hills with a treatable illness and no one in the house who called a doctor. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want stories like this told completely. Hit the button, it keeps this going, and then stay with me. Because this story has layers that most people never reach, and Brittany Murphy deserves to have them reached. November 10th, 1977. Atlanta, Georgia. Brittany Ann Bertolotti is born. Her father is Angelo Bertolotti, Italian-American, connected to organized crime. A man who operated as what has been described as an entrepreneurial figure for organized crime families, and who would spend significant periods of his adult life in prison on drug possession charges. Her mother is Sharon Murphy, of Irish and Slovak descent. The marriage does not survive the combination of Angelo's legal troubles and the specific pressures of a life organized around criminal enterprise. By the time Brittany is 2 years old, her parents have separated and divorced, and Sharon has taken her daughter to Edison, New Jersey, to build a different kind of life. The father's shadow is long and complicated. He loved Brittany. The relationship they had across the years of her life, despite his absences, was one that she valued. He made a specific decision, when Brittany's career was beginning, that reveals something about his understanding of his own position. He allowed Sharon to use her maiden name for Brittany, registering the child as Brittany Murphy rather than Brittany Bertolotti. He did this to protect his daughter from the associations that his name carried. He wanted her to walk into casting rooms and auditions without the baggage of her father's history preceding her. He gave her a clean name. He also gave her the experience of growing up without a reliable father, raised by a single mother with very little money who had turned her entire identity around her daughter's potential. After Brittany's death, Angelo Bertolotti pushed hard for independent investigation. He filed legal proceedings, seeking to have hair samples tested, believing that his daughter had been poisoned. He spoke publicly and repeatedly about his conviction that she had not died of natural causes. He was a complicated man who had been largely absent from his daughter's life and who, after her death, became one of the most vocal advocates for investigating it more thoroughly. Whether his belief about the cause of her death is correct is a question that the available evidence has not definitively answered. Sharon Murphy has been described, across everything written about Brittany's life and death, as the defining relationship of Brittany's existence. She was the stage mother in its most complete form, but it is important to be specific about what kind of stage mother she was, because the stereotype is a controlling villain, and Sharon Murphy was something more complicated and more genuinely devoted than that. She recognized Brittany's talent when Brittany was a very small child, and she organized her entire life around developing it. With the specific single-mindedness of someone who has identified a gift and cannot imagine any other priority. When Brittany was 5, Sharon enrolled her in Vern Fowler's School of Dance and Theater in Colonia, New Jersey. Voice lessons, dance lessons, performance training, all before most children have started first grade. Sharon attended every class, every rehearsal, every performance. She advocated for Brittany in casting rooms. She drove to auditions. She spent money she did not have on headshots and lessons and the infrastructure of a performance career. When it became clear that New Jersey was not going to be sufficient, that the real opportunities were in Los Angeles, Sharon Murphy sold everything they had and moved them to Burbank. Furniture, possessions, the stability of the life they had built. The sacrifice was total, and it was freely chosen because Sharon Murphy believed in her daughter's talent the way that some people believe in their religion, completely, without reserve, as the organizing principle of everything. This devotion shaped Brittany in ways that were both enabling and limiting. It gave her the mother who would do anything for her, who was there, always there, at every stage of the career, and right there in the house in the final years. It also meant that the most important relationship in Brittany's life was with someone whose identity was inseparable from Brittany's success, whose understanding of herself was built around her daughter. The intimacy was real and deep. The dependency was mutual. And when Simon Monjack arrived and began reordering the relationships in Brittany's life, Sharon Murphy was, somehow, the person who remained, who was in the house, who was present at the end, who called 911 that Sunday morning, who would still be in the house when Monjack died 5 months later. When Brittany was 5 years old, she and her mother were dining out, when they noticed that Burt Reynolds and George Segal were seated at an adjacent table. Burt Reynolds was one of the biggest movie stars in the world. George Segal was an Academy Award nominee. Brittany walked over to their table and introduced herself to these two men she did not know. She told them that someday she was going to be a star. The confidence this required of a 5-year-old is almost difficult to comprehend. It also tells you everything you need to know about who Brittany Murphy was at the core of her identity, before Hollywood and the tabloids and Simon Monjack had their various effects on her. A person who saw what she wanted and walked directly toward it with complete conviction, who had no apparent capacity for the ordinary self-doubt that would stop most people from approaching two famous strangers to announce their future. That confidence would be one of the most valuable things she had. It would also, eventually, be one of the things that was most systematically destroyed. Edison, New Jersey, through the 1980s, regional theater, dance classes, school. She was performing in local stage productions of Les Miserables and Really Rosie by age 9. By 13, she was landing national commercial work. By 14, she had a manager and an agent. And then Sharon Murphy made the decision that defined everything that followed. She sold everything they had and moved to Burbank, California, so that her daughter could pursue her career properly. Sharon Murphy sold everything: furniture, possessions, the stability of the life they had built in New Jersey. She moved them both to Burbank with whatever she had left. The commitment was total. Brittany never forgot it. She and her mother were not just parent and child. After that, they were a unit, the two of them against the world, bound together by the specific intimacy of shared sacrifice. It would be the most important relationship of Brittany's life, for better and for worse. In Burbank, the career built quickly. Television roles, Blossom, Drexel's Class, Sister. She was, by all accounts of people who worked with her then, someone who had a quality that the camera recognized immediately: the high, breathy voice, the specific emotional transparency that meant the camera could see what she was feeling, the combination of vulnerability and intelligence that made audiences trust her. Casting agents found her difficult to categorize, which turned out to be an asset rather than a liability. She was not a type. She was herself. In 1994, when she was 17 years old and the youngest member of the cast, she auditioned for a supporting role in a teen comedy called Clueless. The film was written and directed by Amy Heckerling, loosely adapted from Jane Austen's Emma, set in Beverly Hills, and starring Alicia Silverstone as Cher Horowitz, the wealthy, oblivious, good-hearted princess who decides to make over the new girl at school. The new girl was Ty Frazier. The role went to Brittany Murphy. Clueless opened in the summer of 1995 and became, almost immediately, one of those rare films that defines its cultural moment so precisely that it never dates. The language it invented, as if, whatever, she's a total Monet, entered the vernacular within months and has never fully left it. The film is still watched, still quoted, still held up as the defining artifact of a specific American cultural moment. People who encounter it for the first time 30 years after its release find it as alive and funny and emotionally true as it was when it came out. Brittany Murphy's Ty was the performance that people remembered longest, and this is saying something in a film that also contained Alicia Silverstone at the height of her powers, and Paul Rudd in one of his earliest significant roles. She played a character who began as deliberately uncool, the awkward transfer student from New York, uncertain and eager to please, grateful for Cher's attention, wearing flannel shirts and showing no awareness of the social codes that the rest of the cast had internalized as second nature. And then Ty was transformed, under Cher's tutelage, into something more confident. And then the confidence tipped into arrogance. And then something genuine emerged from the other side of the arrogance. The arc was emotionally complicated for what appeared on the surface to be a light comedy, and Brittany played every stage of it with the specific precision of someone who understood the character from the inside, who knew what it felt like to be the new girl, to be remade by someone else's project, to find your footing and then lose it, and then find something more real. Her acting teacher, watching the film in a cinema, said, "Not until I saw her did I feel that she would be a major star." The film earned $56 million against a $12 million budget and was immediately recognized as a sleeper hit of significant cultural resonance. She was 17, she was the youngest person on the cast, and she had given a performance that announced to anyone watching carefully that something specific and rare was present in this person. She had her whole career in front of her. The years after Clueless were busy and building. The roles came with consistency and increasing ambition. She played in independent films and studio films. She played comedy and drama and horror and romance. She was, in the language of the industry, versatile, which is both a compliment and a warning, because versatility in Hollywood often means the industry hasn't decided what to do with you yet. Girl, interrupted in 1999. The film was an awards vehicle for its principal actors. Winona Ryder received an Academy Award nomination. Angelina Jolie won Best Supporting Actress. It was a serious, well-crafted film about young women in a psychiatric institution based on Susanna Kayson's memoir. Brittany Murphy played Daisy Randone, a character who was more broken than she appeared, whose specific damage was different from the other patients in the facility, who ended the film in a way that no one watching was prepared for. Her performance in the film was praised by critics as something specific and real, the particular quality of a person who is using all of their energy to maintain an appearance of normalcy while something else entirely is happening underneath. She could go to dark places. She could stay there long enough to be truthful. She could come back with something that the audience felt, rather than just watched. Don't Say a Word, in 2001, opposite Michael Douglas. Just Married, in 2003, opposite Ashton Kutcher, a romantic comedy that performed well at the box office. Little Black Book, in 2004. Sin City, in 2005. Robert Rodriguez's stylized noir adaptation of Frank Miller's graphic novels, in which Brittany played a prostitute-turned-assassin with the specific cold ferocity that the material required and that nobody who had seen her in Just Married would have predicted she could deliver. She also began her long tenure as the voice of Luann Platter on King of the Hill in the late 1990s, a role she would maintain for most of the animated series run on Fox. The voice work was a different kind of performance, no body to hide behind or deploy, just the voice and the character and the specific quality of Brittany's warmth and her specific comedic instinct, which the microphone caught and the audience responded to for years. And in 2002, the film that most significantly demonstrated what she was capable of, 8 Mile. And 8 Mile was the semi-autobiographical film about Eminem's early years as a rapper in Detroit, directed by Curtis Hanson, one of the most respected directors of his generation, the man who had made L.A. Confidential. It was a serious film about poverty and ambition and race, and the specific culture of Detroit's underground rap battle scene, and it was a significant commercial and critical success. Brittany Murphy played Alex, the young woman at the center of Eminem's character's romantic life, someone navigating her own ambitions within the same gritty world. The performance required something different from everything she had done before. Not warmth and vulnerability, though those things were still there. Grittiness, a quality of lived-in reality, the ability to hold the screen opposite one of the most charismatic performers of his generation without being diminished by the proximity. She did all of it. Rolling Stone praised the performance. The film opened at #1 at the box office. It confirmed that Brittany Murphy could do serious, adult, dramatic material at the highest level, opposite the most demanding of co-stars. There was also, during and immediately after the filming of 8 Mile, a brief romantic relationship between Brittany Murphy and Eminem. She spoke about it in subsequent interviews with consistent warmth and respect, describing him as one of the most talented people she had ever encountered. Speaking of the experience, with the specific warmth of someone who means what she says, he has not spoken publicly about it in depth. The relationship lasted a short time and ended. She spoke well of him. She moved on. She dated Ashton Kutcher after just married in 2003. They were one of Hollywood's more photographed young couples for a period. The relationship lasted less than a year. When she died, Kutcher wrote, "Today, the world lost a little piece of sunshine." He meant it. The people who knew her in these years, the years when the career was strong and the relationships were public and the trajectory was still pointing upward, describe her consistently as someone who brought a specific quality, warmth into every room, who made you feel that her attention, when she gave it to you, was genuinely yours. Sin City, in 2005. Robert Rodriguez's stylized, high-contrast noir film in which she played a damaged, dangerous character that had nothing in common with Ty Frazier from Clueless, and everything in common with the full range of what Brittany Murphy could do. Happy Feet in 2006, providing the singing voice for Gloria the Penguin, performing Queen's Somebody to Love and Earth. Wind and Fire's Boogie Wonderland, with a specific musicality of someone who had been trained in voice since she was 5 years old. The animation audiences heard that voice and loved it without necessarily knowing whose it was. The performance was uncanny in the best sense. The voice made you see the character. The voice acting on King of the Hill, across the show's run as Luann Platter, Hank Hill's niece, the aspiring beautician, the young woman trying to build a life with the tools her limited upbringing had given her. The character ran through the entire series, and Brittany's voice was the character's voice for years. It was a different kind of work from film acting, requiring the performer to generate an entire human being from sound alone, and she was excellent at it. In 2006, a collaboration with the British DJ Paul Oakenfold on a track called Faster Kill Pussycat that reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Dance Club Play chart, a genuine pop hit. She could sing. She had known this since Vern Fowler's School of Dance and Theater in New Jersey when she was 5 years old, and the music industry was the last place she brought it. She could do everything: drama, comedy, physical performance in action films, voice work in animation and television, music. The range was not just diversity for its own sake. Each thing she did in each category demonstrated genuine capability, genuine craft, the specific quality of someone who had been trained well and who brought something particular to the training. And then, somewhere in the middle of all of this, the industry began the specific work of destruction that it performs on women who do not conform to its requirements, who are not thin enough in the right way, who are not desirable in the way the industry has decided desirability looks, who are huggable but not fuckable. An agent told Brittany Murphy she was huggable but not fuckable. This was said to her face. A professional, employed to help her career, communicating to her directly that her body was not acceptable to the industry she had built her life around, that she was likable but not desirable, that she was the friendly, warmth-generating, supporting player, the huggable one but not the lead, not the object of desire, not the woman the camera would follow without apology, not fuckable. The word itself is the point. The specific language of the film industry's evaluation of women's bodies, stated plainly. The HBO Max documentary, What Happened, Brittany Murphy, addressed this episode and what followed from it. The assessment landed in a specific place. She was a person whose entire identity had been organized, since she was 5 years old, around the belief that she was worth watching, worth following, worth the room's attention, worth the sacrifice her mother had made when she sold everything and drove them to California. She had made that belief true through talent and work and the specific quality of presence she had. And an agent in a meeting told her that her body was wrong. She was a person with specific vulnerabilities to exactly this kind of message. She had grown up with very little money. Her mother had sacrificed everything. The industry's approval was the justification for all of it. To be told that she was not what the industry wanted in those specific words, in that specific meeting, was to be told that the entire project was flawed. She cared enormously. She wanted to be the person she had told Burt Reynolds she was going to be. The weight loss that followed was documented by the tabloid press of the early 2000s, with the specific obsessiveness that the tabloid culture of that era applied to women's bodies. Photographs of her with circles and arrows indicating her thinness, speculation about eating disorders, commentary from unnamed sources about her appearance. The bodies of young women in Hollywood in 2003, 2004, 2005 were treated as public property, open to evaluation, commentary, and diagnosis from anyone with a camera and a column. When Brittany Murphy appeared noticeably thinner than she had been in the years of Clueless and Just Married, the coverage was immediate and merciless. When she denied having an eating disorder, the denial was treated as further evidence. When she addressed the coverage, it generated more coverage. The loop had no clean exit. The industry told her to be thinner. The media photographed her being thinner and called it a disorder. She denied the disorder. The media called the denial a lie. The industry continued to evaluate her. She continued to lose weight. And then Simon Monjack arrived and, according to the people closest to her during this period, actively encouraged her to lose more weight and to get more plastic surgery. He told her, according to a People magazine reporter who covered the couple closely, that her teeth were not right, that her nose was not right, that her chin might need work. He encouraged her, in this account, to become addicted to cosmetic surgery. She was becoming increasingly insecure about her appearance, increasingly paranoid that people were following her. Into this specific configuration of pressures and vulnerabilities, in 2006, arrived Simon Monjack. Simon Mark Monjack was born in Hillingdon, England, on March 9, 1970. He grew up in Buckinghamshire, attended private schools, and lost his father to a brain tumor when he was 15 years old. He moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in the film industry, the outer edges of it, the part that exists in the gap between real productions and aspirational ones. He wrote and directed a small B-movie in 2000 called 2 Days, 9 Lives, starring Luke Goss of the pop group Bros. He claimed credits on projects that those projects' actual makers disputed. He received a story credit on Factory Girl, the 2006 film about Edie Sedgwick, that the film's actual director, George Hickenlooper, said Monjack had nothing to do with, and that arrived through what Hickenlooper called a frivolous lawsuit, making false claims. He presented himself as a filmmaker and screenwriter of some standing. The evidence for this standing was thin. His legal record was considerably more substantial. Arrest warrants issued in Virginia in 2005 for credit card fraud charges that were later dropped. A lawsuit from the British bank Coutts for approximately £470,000 related to unpaid debts, multiple evictions from properties he had failed to pay rent on. An arrest in February 2007 and 9 days in detention for overstaying his American visa, facing deportation proceedings that were eventually resolved. He had also, separately, had a previous marriage to a British woman named Simone Bien, married in Las Vegas in 2001, divorced in 2006. The divorce was the same year he began his relationship with Brittany Murphy. He also had, as would come out after Brittany's death, at least 2 children from other women that he had not disclosed to Brittany Murphy before or during their marriage. The documentary, What Happened, Brittany Murphy, examined this. He had fathered children. He had not told his wife about them. This information was among the things her friends and family did not know to tell her before the wedding because they did not know it existed. He claimed, in a 2008 interview that he had first met Murphy during a photo shoot when she was still in her teens and had been very patient. He said this as if patience was something to be admired in this context, as if the appropriate response to an adult man's account of waiting for a teenage girl to become available was approval. Whatever the truth of this specific claim, by 2006, they were in a relationship, and by April 2007, they were married in a private ceremony at the house on Rising Glen Road. Friends had staged an intervention before the wedding. The specific people who knew Brittany Murphy well enough to see what was happening, who observed the dynamic between her and Monjack, who noticed the way she was changing around him, came together and told her what they saw. They told her they were worried. They told her his past was a problem. They told her to wait. She told them Simon was her soulmate. She did not wait. The wedding was in April 2007. By the time the marriage had been running for a year, the specific shape of what Monjack was doing had become visible to anyone paying attention. She fired her entire professional team, the agents, the managers, the publicists who had been part of her career, and Monjack took over the management of her career himself. He monitored her communications. Friends say Murphy lost access to her own phone and email address, and that all contact came through Monjack. He accompanied her to every set. On some productions, he insisted on doing her makeup himself, a bizarre boundary crossing that nobody on those sets knew how to address. Director Alex Merkin, who worked with her on Across the Hall in 2008, described what he observed. Brittany would arrive on set in a good place, present, focused, recognizably the actress he had hired. Then she would go off with Monjack, and when she came back, she was different, less present, off balance in a specific way that Merkin recognized as the aftermath of something that had just happened in that private space between them. Monjack also insisted on doing his wife's makeup on the Across the Hall set, a behavior so unusual and boundary-crossing that it made the crew uncomfortable. He was, by all available accounts, present on every set she worked on during this period, monitoring, intervening, maintaining his position as the necessary intermediary between Brittany and the rest of the world. Friends who had known her before Monjack described the specific experience of trying to reach her during the marriage and finding that access ran through him. Phone calls were answered by Monjack. Emails were filtered by Monjack. The direct line to Brittany Murphy, the person they had known before, had been replaced by a gatekeeper who determined what communications she received and from whom. I think Simon tried to keep her off balance to make her feel like he was the only one who could protect her, Merkin said. He created an us against the world mentality that felt very controlling and manipulative. This is the recognizable grammar of a specific kind of coercive control, the isolation from existing support systems, the monopolization of communication, the systematic erosion of independent judgment, the manufactured dependency that makes the victim increasingly reliant on the controller because the controller has removed the alternatives. You are not safe without me. The world is against you. Only I understand you. The support system that would have enabled the victim to leave or to see clearly what is happening has been removed, piece by piece, until the only person available is the person doing the removing. She had told her friends he was her soulmate. She had refused their intervention. She had made her choice. And the consequences of that choice were becoming visible to everyone who worked with her in 2008 and 2009. Meanwhile, the career was collapsing in parallel. She was fired from Across the Hall mid-production, and the director eventually making the decision that the situation on set was not manageable. She was rejected from the voice cast of Disney's Tinker Bell. She was rejected from Happy Feet 2, the sequel to a film she had contributed to significantly. The film projects that reached her were smaller, lower budget, less significant. The trajectory that had included Clueless and Girl, Interrupted, and 8 Mile and Sin City was heading somewhere else entirely. By April 2009, when she arrived on the Oregon set of Something Wicked, the makeup artist, Trista Jordan, was stunned by what she saw. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes were really sunken, and she didn't have any sense of balance. The woman who had been the energetic, warmly present actress of Clueless and 8 Mile was physically diminished in a way that Trista Jordan has said in interviews since she wishes she had done more about. Monjack insisted on doing his wife's makeup himself on that set, a behavior that Jordan described as bizarre, that placed Monjack in a role that was both professionally inappropriate and physically intimate in a way that maintained his presence between Brittany and the people around her. Murphy repeatedly asked for her mother during the filming. Sharon came and administered something, an injection, an infusion, what appeared to be some kind of supplement or medical support, and Murphy would have it and be able to continue. The production required this routine throughout the shoot. If she needed medical support to get through a day's work on a film set in April 2009, she needed medical care that a film set was not equipped to provide. Jordan has said she wishes she had intervened more aggressively. She has said, "I don't think she surrounded herself with the right people. I think if she hadn't met Simon Monjack, she'd probably still be alive." This assessment, made by someone who worked with her in the final year of her life, and who watched the dynamic between Brittany, Monjack, and Sharon Murphy at close range, is shared by others who knew her in this period. In November 2009, Murphy traveled with Monjack, her mother Sharon, and her Maltese puppy Clara to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to film a low-budget thriller called The Caller. A Hollywood Reporter piece by family friend Alex Ben Block documented what happened on the trip. The first day of shooting, Monjack arrived on the set, drunk and combative. He was banned from the production. Murphy, apparently unwilling or unable to work without him present, parted ways with the film. She and Monjack and Sharon stayed in Puerto Rico for a period after she left the film, and while there, Monjack and Sharon both contracted a Staphylococcus aureus bacterial infection. On the flight back to Los Angeles, Monjack told those around him on the plane that he was having a heart attack. He was having chest pains, difficulty breathing. Brittany Murphy administered CPR to her husband on the aircraft. His mother, Linda, would later confirm that he had had some kind of cardiac episode around this time, that he had been dealing with seizures and sleep apnea and ongoing health issues. He was sick. He had been sick. And he was still in the house on Rising Glen Road, sick, when the staph infection that he and Sharon had caught in Puerto Rico eventually spread to Brittany. She caught it, and it hit her hard. Staphylococcus aureus is a bacterial infection that can produce severe systemic illness in people whose immune systems are already compromised, people who are malnourished, anemic, immunodepressed. Brittany Murphy, by the end of 2009, was all of these things. Her weight was significantly below what it had been in her prime years. The anemia had become recurrent. This was her second bout of severe iron deficiency anemia in a single month. She was living in a house with 2 other sick people, and was herself the caregiver in a situation that required her own medical care. She did not seek that care. For 6 weeks, she tried to manage the illness herself. By mid-December 2009, she had severe laryngitis, was physically deteriorating in visible ways, and was continuing to care for Monjack and manage the household. People who care for others while sick themselves often put off seeking their own treatment because there is no one available to fill the role they are filling. Brittany Murphy was caring for a husband with seizures and sleep apnea and cardiac issues. She was caring for her mother, who was a breast cancer survivor dealing with neuropathy. She was sick, and there was no one to care for her. On December 3, 2009, 17 days before she died, Brittany Murphy made her last public media appearance at a promotional event in Hollywood. She spoke to Access Hollywood and expressed her hopes for the new year. She said she hoped to have a baby in the coming year. She looked unwell to people who saw the footage. She sounded unwell. She finally called a doctor on Friday, December 18th, and scheduled an appointment. The appointment was for Monday, December 21st. On Sunday morning, December 20th, 2009, Sharon Murphy found her daughter unconscious in the bathroom of the house on Rising Glen Road. She called 911. She said her daughter had a cold. She said her daughter couldn't walk right. She said her daughter had passed out. Brittany Murphy was transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and was pronounced dead at 10:04 a.m. She never made it to the Monday appointment. She was 32 years old. She had been sick for 6 weeks. She had been in the house with 2 other sick people. She had been without proper medical care for the full duration of an illness that a hospital visit might have resolved in days. She made the appointment on Friday. She died on Sunday. That specific gap, 2 days, is one of the cruelest measurements in this whole story. The Los Angeles County Coroner's report, issued in February 2010, listed the cause of death as pneumonia, with severe iron deficiency anemia and multiple drug intoxication as secondary factors. The drugs found in her system were all legal: hydrocodone and acetaminophen from prescribed pain medication, L-methamphetamine from a decongestant, chlorpheniramine from an allergy medication. The contents of a medicine cabinet, the drugs of a very sick woman trying to manage her symptoms without proper medical supervision, taking what was available. The report noted that the physiological effects of elevated levels of these medications cannot be excluded as a contributing factor, particularly given her already weakened state from the pneumonia and anemia. The manner of death was ruled accidental. The investigators who responded to the scene found, at Simon Monjack's bedside, 90 prescription bottles. 90. Several of them were filled out in names other than his own. One of the names was Lola Manilow. These are presumed to be aliases used to obtain prescriptions, a method of obtaining controlled substances while avoiding the paper trail that a single name would create. Nobody was charged with anything related to these bottles, these names, or their contents. When asked after Brittany's death why he had initially resisted allowing an autopsy, Monjack said to Larry King, "This pristine body, curvy, in all the right places, with skin like silk. How could I say, 'cut it up,' in front of her mother?" This statement is worth sitting with. His wife had died. The question was whether an autopsy would be performed to determine the cause of her death. And his response was an aesthetic evaluation of her body and a suggestion that performing a standard medical legal procedure would be an indignity. The statement produced an almost universal response of unease in people who heard it. The statement also, in the view of many who analyzed it afterward, revealed something about the way Monjack related to Brittany Murphy's body as an object to be evaluated and managed and protected, rather than a person whose death required investigation. She was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills on December 24, 2009, Christmas Eve. The world turned its attention to Simon Monjack, who gave interviews and appeared on television with the specific quality of someone performing grief without quite landing the right notes. He appeared on Larry King Live with Sharon Murphy, the two of them seated together, seemingly disoriented, their interaction generating the specific unease of something that did not correspond to what it was supposed to be. A photo shoot that Sharon and Monjack did together after Brittany's death, in which they held hands and gazed at each other, produced, in people who saw it, the observation that they looked less like a grieving husband and mother-in-law and more like something else. An insider described it as looking like parents grieving as opposed to a husband and his mother-in-law. The documentary, What Happened, Brittany Murphy, examined the nature of the relationship between Monjack and Sharon Murphy in the months after Brittany's death, presenting evidence that suggested something unsavory without drawing definitive conclusions. Whatever the truth of it, Sharon Murphy and Simon Monjack were sharing the house on Rising Glen Road in the months after Brittany's death. On May 23, 2010, 5 months after Brittany Murphy's death, Sharon Murphy was in the house when she found Simon Monjack unconscious in the master bedroom, the same bedroom, in the same house. She called 911, at 9:20 p.m. Paramedics arrived. Monjack was pronounced dead at 9:45 p.m. He was 40 years old. The coroner's findings: acute pneumonia and severe anemia, the same causes as Brittany Murphy's death 5 months earlier, in the same house, in what appeared to be the same bedroom. Both of them dead before 40 from the same combination of causes in the same location within 5 months. Monjack's mother, Linda, had told People magazine in January 2010, between the two deaths, that her son had suffered what appeared to be a mild heart attack in the week before Brittany's death, that he had seizures, and that there had been ongoing health concerns. His body was, apparently, genuinely compromised. The pneumonia and anemia that killed him may have been the natural progression of pre-existing conditions in a man whose health was already failing. The Los Angeles County Department of Health Services examined the house and raised the possibility that toxic mold might be a contributing factor to both deaths. The coroner's office said there were no indicators that mold was a factor. Brittany Murphy's father, Angelo Bertolotti, who had been largely absent from his daughter's life, but who loved her deeply and who was devastated by her death, initiated legal proceedings to have hair samples independently tested. He believed she had been poisoned. The testing he commissioned produced findings about elevated levels of certain heavy metals. Independent analysts disputed whether those levels were clinically significant and whether the tests had been conducted and interpreted correctly. The official cause and manner of both deaths remained accidental, natural causes. 2 people, 1 house, same causes, 5 months apart, no charges ever filed, no criminal investigation that led anywhere. The questions that anyone hearing this story immediately asks have not been definitively answered. They may never be. 2 people, 1 house, same bedroom, same causes, 5 months apart. Simon Monjack was buried next to Brittany Murphy at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills. The man who had isolated her from her friends, controlled her communications, insisted on managing a career he was not qualified to manage, pushed her toward plastic surgery and further weight loss, and accompanied her to her death in a $3.9 million house in Hollywood Hills, now lies in the same cemetery as the woman he had married and declared his soulmate. Whatever happened in that house, whatever the full truth is about the 6 weeks of untreated illness, about the 90 prescription bottles and third-party names found at Monjack's bedside, about the specific dynamics between Brittany and Monjack and Sharon Murphy in those final months, certain things can be said clearly. Brittany Murphy did not need to die when she did. The illness that killed her was treatable. The conditions that made the illness as severe as it became, the malnutrition, the anemia, the compromised immune system, the 6 weeks without a doctor, were the products of a specific set of circumstances that had built over years. She was 32 years old. A doctor and a hospital course of treatment for pneumonia and anemia had a very high probability of saving her life. She did not receive that treatment until it was too late to matter. The specific combination of circumstances that produced December 20th, 2009, was not primarily the result of Brittany Murphy's own choices. It was the result of an industry that told her her body was wrong and set off a chain of consequences. It was the result of a media culture that photographed and analyzed and speculated about her body until the body became the primary thing about her in her own mind. It was the result of a man who had a documented history of fraud and manipulation and who isolated her from the people who might have seen clearly what was happening and intervened. It was the result of an illness that went untreated for 6 weeks in a house where nobody called a doctor. The career that ended there deserved more. Clueless has never dated people who encounter it for the first time today, find it as alive and funny and emotionally true as audiences in 1995 did. Her Ty Frazier remains one of the most precise performances in the film. 8 Mile holds up. Girl, Interrupted holds up. The voice work, Across the Run, of King of the Hill holds up. The collaboration with Paul Oakenfold on Faster Kill Pussycat holds up. The range she demonstrated across those different kinds of work, comedy, drama, action, voice, music, was exceptional and largely unrewarded by the industry at the level it deserved. Director Alex Merkin was honest about this. He placed her in the same category as Marilyn Monroe and James Dean, the stars whose careers never reached the heights they should have, not because of limitations in their talent, but because of the forces that surrounded them. He worked with her at the end of her career, when those forces had already done most of their damage, and he still saw it. The talent was still there. The circumstances had changed the conditions for its expression. The HBO Max documentary, What Happened, Brittany Murphy, aired in 2021 and examined the full arc of her life and death, the career, the industry pressures, Monjack, the isolation, the final months, the deaths. It presented the evidence and raised the questions. It did not provide definitive answers about what happened in the house on Rising Glen Road. The definitive answers are not available. Ashton Kutcher, when he heard the news of her death, said, "Today, the world lost a little piece of sunshine. The people who knew her say consistently that she made you feel seen, that her attention, when she gave it to you, was complete and genuine and warm. The people who worked with her say she had the specific quality that the best performers have, the quality that makes the camera and the audience believe in them completely, that makes you watch them instead of the other people in the scene, that makes their presence feel necessary. She had it from the moment she walked onto the set of Clueless at 17, and she had it in the last film she made before her death. The world never fully gave her the career it should have. The things that were taken from her were taken by specific people and a specific culture. And those things included years of work that we will never see, and roles that were never offered, and a life that ended at 32 in a house she wanted to leave. Her name was Brittany Ann Murphy. She was born November 10, 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. She was raised in Edison, New Jersey, by a mother who sold everything to get her to Hollywood. 2. She walked up to Burt Reynolds at 5 years old and told him she was going to be a star. She was 17 when she made Clueless. She had one of the most distinctive presences of her generation. She was told she was huggable but not fuckable, and it changed the direction of everything. She was 32 years old when she died, in a bathroom in Hollywood Hills, having finally called a doctor on Friday for an appointment on Monday that she did not make it to. Subscribe to this channel right now if this story meant something to you. Every subscription makes this work possible and keeps these stories getting told. Hit the button and come back. Because there are more stories like this, more lives that the headlines reduce to a single line, more truths that deserve to be followed all the way to the end, more people who were more than what happened to them and who deserve to be remembered for the full thing. She was one of them. She was a little piece of sunshine and a working-class girl from Edison who became something extraordinary and then lost it to a combination of forces, no single one of which she could have fully resisted on her own. That is the honest account, the full one, the one she deserves. She was a little piece of sunshine. The world has been a little darker since the morning of December 20th, 2009. The house on Rising Glen Road was eventually sold. Sharon Murphy left California. Simon Monjack is buried next to Brittany at Forest Lawn. The questions remain open. The career that should have been longer is what it is. The voice that performed Somebody to Love for a children's animated film and delivered Ty Frazier's transformation and held the screen opposite Eminem is gone. What is not gone is the work itself, which the years have treated with the specific generosity that good work receives. Clueless is a classic. It is taught in film schools. It is quoted by people who were not born when it was made. Her Ty Frazier is still the performance people remember longest when they think about that film, the most emotionally honest thing in a film full of good performances. 8 Mile holds up. The voice on King of the Hill is still the voice in every episode of that show's long run. What Brittany Murphy left is permanent and real. What was taken from her by the industry and the media, and the man she called her soulmate, is also real. Both things are true. The full story requires holding both at once: the career that was extraordinary and the conditions that limited and eventually ended it, the talent that was genuine and the forces that were arrayed against it. The woman who walked up to Burt Reynolds at 5 years old with complete conviction, and the 32-year-old who died in a bathroom because a treatable illness went untreated for 6 weeks, in a house where nobody called doctor. Her name was Brittany Ann Murphy, born November 10, 1977, died December 20, 2009. She was 32 years old. She was a little piece of sunshine. She deserved more years to shine,